Will the Minnesota Vikings address the wide receiver or backup quarterback position before the start of the regular season? We're going to be talking about it on today's edition of Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and welcome in. So why are we talking about the wide receiver position? Kevin O'Connell today during his press conference gave an update on wide receiver Jalen Nailor, and it's not a positive one. Jalen Nailor is considered week to week dealing with that left hand injury, and that's leaving this Vikings wide receiver room looking incredibly thin. I would be stunned if they don't make a move at the wide receiver spot. We'll talk about some options here in a second, but I'm anticipating the Vikings will make a move at some point over the next 3 weeks before Monday Night Football Week 1 against the Chicago Bears. So if the Vikings do make a move, we will make a video for you guys ASAP. So hit that subscribe button today. Don't miss a thing around your favorite football team. We should see some roster moves coming in over the next couple of weeks. So don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button today. Now, I just want to first, address this. Who is going to play wide receiver for the Vikings? Let's just play the hypothetical that Jalen Nailor is not able to go week 1. So you're without Nailor, you're without Rondale Moore, you're without Jordan Addison, and at least Justin Jefferson, positive update there, he will be ready to go for week 1. He's already going to be back at practice today dealing with that hamstring injury. But the healthy wide receivers for week 1, it's Justin Jefferson and a bunch of nobodies. If you weren't following the Minnesota Vikings, you have no idea who these 4 guys are. And I don't mean that as a slight to these 4, but with the Vikings having Super Bowl aspirations, do you want to roll out for the first 3 weeks with Lucky Jackson, Tim Jones, Jayshon Jones, and Thayer Thomas? I think this is officially a problem now for the Minnesota Vikings. Originally I was saying, you can man the ship a little bit. You can lean more into TJ Hawkinson. You can lean more into the run game over the first 3 weeks. But I think this is officially a problem because can you imagine the looks that number 18 is going to get week 1 against the Chicago Bears? You're going to have Jalen Johnson on you. You're going to have a safety over a top. You're going to probably have a linebacker shading your way. This is officially an issue for the Minnesota Vikings. So what could they do? They could hit the trade market. They could hit free agency and maybe try to get another wide receiver here. But I don't think the answer to this problem is as simple as, we'll just get TJ Hawkinson more involved. We'll just get the run game going a little bit. I think it's deeper than that, and I think the Vikings either address it and bring in another wide receiver. So 5 guys we'll talk about here. Number 1, I think one of the most underrated wideouts in the National Football League, a guy who I'm a massive fan of, and we're going to go Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the Colts actually have a deep wide receiver room. So I think the Vikings, if they wanted to go get Alec Pierce, I think they could. Now, they probably have to overpay a little bit. And also, I don't know if the Colts, would want to move off him, but it would probably require an overpay. But this guy's one of the best deep threats in the National Football League. The year he had last year was unbelievable. 37 receptions, 824 yards, averaging 22.3 yards per catch. But that's kind of been just an uptick of what he's been doing throughout his career. He's always been a big play guy. He can take the top off the defense. He's a great 50-50 catch player. And I think he is truly one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. I think if he would be the wide receiver 3 for this group, he would be one of the better ones in the National Football League. And, if he, mans that third wide receiver position when Addison and Jefferson come back, that would be an unbelievable room. But also, he would make a solid wide receiver too. So I don't know how aggressive the Vikings will be here, but if they truly view this as a dire need to go get another wide receiver, Alec Pierce, he's a good name to keep your eyes out on. Again, incredibly unlikely that this happens before the season, but you never know. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah might be picking up the phone and calling just about anybody for any of their top-tier wide receivers trying to get another guy in this room. Now, somebody who won't require as much draft capital as Alec Pierce, and actually a guy I'm a massive fan of. He might be a top 10 fastest player in the National Football League, that being Trey Palmer of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, also, I don't think it's a guarantee that Trey Palmer makes the Buccaneers roster, which, Tampa may be willing to let him go for a late pick. Maybe the Vikings can just offer him, that typical 7th, 6th round pick swap, and the Vikings get Trey Palmer and a 7th round pick, and they send out a 6th. But with how stacked that room is in Tampa Bay, and we already got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They drafted Tez Johnson. Emeka Buka looks fantastic. He might end up being wide receiver 1 there before the end of the season. So, a guy like Trey Palmer, maybe they could be looking to move off him. So another guy to keep your eyes out on. And then a guy we've talked about a lot, Adam Thielen, Minnesota legend here. I think I would be officially all in on Thielen. And this is one of those moves that's starting to make almost too much sense, where it's like you have the return of Thielen. Obviously, Vikings fans would be thrilled about it. He understands the Kevin O'Connell system. He knows what it's like to play next to that elite number one wide receiver in Justin Jefferson. And also, he can still step up, be a very solid wide receiver 2 still. He could be a great wide receiver 3. He's still been very, very productive over the last couple of seasons in Carolina. And I'm sure maybe the Panthers front office would maybe want to do Thielen, almost a good service. Be like, hey, man, we're going to go in a different direction. We're going to give a lot more attention to, Tet McMillan, Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker. Like, they have a bunch of guys that they're fans of in that wide receiver room. So maybe Thielen goes to the front office and says, hey, I want a bigger role on a championship contending team. Let me come home to the Minnesota Vikings. I don't know. Vikes still got $27 million in cap space for a reason. Could it be for a Thielen trade? Could it be for a backup quarterback? Who knows? But I think a Thielen trade is definitely still on the table. And another guy in free agency here. What about a little Amari Cooper? Now, we have talked about Amari. Drop issues have definitely been a problem for his game over the last couple of years. And also another reason why I don't think the Vikings would be too interested in Amari Cooper is Cooper's not a good run blocker. He's one of the worst run blockers in that NFL at the wide receiver spot. And with the Vikings wanting to lean more into the run, especially during the first couple of weeks, would you trust him on the perimeter, having those home run ceiling blocks? I'm not sure, but he at least, solid route runner, can get open. And KOC, especially in this system, playing next to Jefferson, he should have a great, first 3 games if he is the wide receiver 2. But I think the guy that's probably going to come back is Brandon Powell. Now, Brandon Powell, obviously familiar with KOC, dating back to the days in Los Angeles. And obviously he was the punt returner and the wide receiver 3 for the Vikes over the last couple of years. So I think there is a chance he comes back. And honestly, this is my prediction for what the Vikings do at the wide receiver spot. Because Brandon Powell, he was actually at the game this past Saturday. He said he was there supporting his boys. I'm pretty sure that was Thayer Thomas and Jayshon Jones he was tagging in that. But I think Brandon Powell, clearly he loves Kevin O'Connell. He loves the Minnesota Vikings organization. And maybe there's a reason he hasn't signed just yet. Maybe hoping in the back of his mind that some injuries would happen with the Vikings wideout room. But I think the Vikes this offseason, they had a decision. Rondale Moore, Brandon Powell. They went Rondale Moore for the upside. But now they might just need to call up Brandon Powell. Just get another body who at least just knows the system. He'll be in the right spot at the right time. He's obviously not going to completely move the needle, but if you just added Brandon Powell to this room, I'm saying the Vikings are okay. You can at least man the ship while Addison is suspended. But you guys let me know. Drop a name down below in the comments section. Maybe you have a wide receiver I'm not thinking of. Let me know your thoughts. Name a wide receiver the Vikings should bring in. Drop that name down below. All right, coming up next here on the program, I do want to talk about the backup quarterback position because I don't think the Vikings will make a move at that spot before the season. But Sam Howell is struggling during the preseason. I just want to give you guys my thoughts there. But before we do so, I do want to let you guys know that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, and preseason football is underway and college football is here. So don't miss any of the action this season on Prize Picks. And if you guys download the app today and plug in promo code CLNS, you guys will get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Now, Prize Picks is simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. Prize Picks is also the best way to get action on sports in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Prize Picks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. So if you guys want to give Prize Picks a look, download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. And here's an example of a lineup I'm rolling with today. Monday Night Football getting underway between the Commanders and the Bengals. I'm going to take the more on Sam Hartman at 85.5 passing yards, more on Taj Brooks, 31.5 rushing yards. They also have a free square for you guys where Avery Johnson, Kansas State quarterback, Saturday at 11, just needs to get 1 passing yard for 1 free win on Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today, plug in that promo code CLNS, get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Shout out to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, let's talk about the quarterback 2 spot because I see some Vikings fans freaking out a little bit. Then I see some Vikings fans saying, hey, we're all good. We got Max Brosmer. It's all going to be okay. And I love Mad Max. He's been a great story so far to follow during the preseason. But is he a high-end backup? Is he a middle of the tier backup? I think the jury's still out on that, but I think he's a solid backup option right now. And I think the QB depth chart, if I was making the call, I think this is how I'd have it shaken out. J.J. McCarthy, obviously, number 1, and Max Brosmer, number 2. Sam Howell, I would still put him in at the 3rd spot, considering the Vikings did trade back in the draft for him. I don't know if they would just want to cut bait. Then I will have Brett Rypien at number 4. Just Rypien hasn't shown me enough. And honestly, Sam Howell hasn't either. I just think they would have him higher up on the depth chart just because they did trade back for him. But my take on it is the Vikings should not panic and trade for a backup quarterback. We have seen this Vikings team, especially under Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, they have panicked before, gave up some draft capital to go get a guy on like a 1-year rental, and it necessarily hasn't always worked out. So don't panic just yet. If an injury comes, then obviously you're going to have to trade for a quarterback. But one thing that just drove me crazy this past weekend was seeing this guy, Teddy Bridgewater. He was balling out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 6 of 11, 85 yards, 2 touchdowns. He would by far be the second best quarterback on the Minnesota Vikings, and this was a quarterback you could have signed where it didn't affect the comp pick formula. It was after the NFL draft, so he was out there. He was available. You knew Teddy would have loved to return to Minnesota. I'm just a little disappointed that they didn't sign a guy like that. And I'm also just disappointed they didn't handle the situation a whole lot better because I understand the comp pick side of it. You didn't want to go out there and get a Joe Flacco, a Gardner Minshew because you wanted to get that comp pick for Daniel Jones leaving. So I fully understand that. But also, the backup quarterback position, it's a valuable spot in the NFL. And just calling a spade, J.J. McCarthy, 22 years old, coming off that torn meniscus, it's just a little egregious that the Vikings didn't put more of their offseason assets into that spot. So I'll quickly go over some backup quarterback options. Now, this hypothetical is only if J.J. McCarthy were to have to miss some games. Maybe he's out for like 2 to 3 weeks, and the Vikings got to go get a guy. And still number 1 on my list is Joe Flacco. Now, Flacco was just named the starter in Cleveland, so this hypothetical would mainly be for eventually once the Browns do bench Flacco for one of your young guys, Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, maybe they could be offering Flacco up there on the trade block. So just keep your eyes out there. And also a guy like Tyrod Taylor, if Justin Fields is having a good year, maybe one of those backups, Brady Cook or Adrian Martinez ends up stepping up for that group. Maybe he could be, available. And again, this is the hypothetical. If JJ gets hurt, the Vikings would have to overpay for a veteran backup. So a team like the Jets, like the Browns, who are still maybe trying to find their franchise guy, they would love to take in that extra draft capital. But a guy that, could be an option before the season, I think, is Jameis Winston. Now, I think there's no doubt Russell Wilson will be QB1 week 1, and then Jackson Dart will be QB2 on that depth chart when it's all said and done. And you could have a guy like Jameis who can step in and at least man the ship. Like, Jameis is better than Max Brosmer, Sam Howell, and Brett Rypien, no doubt in my mind. And, him throwing the Jefferson, Kevin O'Connell, I like that idea. And then we also just got to talk about Kirk Cousins. Now, if JJ were to get hurt, and I'm going to knock on wood right now, hopefully you guys heard that, but if JJ gets hurt, Kirk Cousins is number 1 for me. He understands the KOC system. He loves Minnesota. He loves this fan base. And, I still feel like he is a top 30-ish quarterback in the NFL right now. So, if at all, worst case scenario, Kirk would be number 1. And then also another guy, Andy Dalton. I think he's on the same level as Kirk Cousins, Joe Flacco here for me, where if JJ, goes down, has to miss a game, a guy like Dalton could step in and, at least play some good football where it wouldn't be like, oh, we're sending out Max Brosmer against, the Baltimore Ravens. What are we going to do? We got no chance to win that game. At least with Dalton, Flacco, Kirk, Tyrod, honestly, any of these guys, would give you just a flyer to win that game. But I'll ask you guys this. What say you on this one? Do the Vikings need another backup quarterback? Give me a Y for yes. Give me an N for no. I'm going to say no right now. But you're also one injury away from having this be, a very serious issue for this football team. And, also, if any team starting quarterback goes down, they're all hitting the panic button. But I just think it's heightened here with the Vikings backup quarterback situation. So, I'm going to say no, but this obviously could change, just in one play. But if you guys want to hit me up on Twitter, got any more questions, comments, or concerns around your Minnesota Vikings, hit me up over there at Pat Siepman, the handle. We'll see you guys next time. As always, just go Vikes.